Globalism and Nationalism. Segment 2, International Settlements. Our preparatory video for the experiments to be examined here established a hypothetical input-output structure with just two national economies, each of which is composed of the same two industries and the same single household. That video introduced a benchmark model created by adding a facility for international finance to SF Econ's basic Model 0. The benchmark model featured international settlement accounts balancing whatever trade imbalances might be present. Such models have been criticized as representative of the Axis powers that were brought down in the Second World War. In the experiments created for this essay, all the models to be compared are initiated with both economies having identical steady states. And each demonstration is set in motion by the same stimulus. Industry number 2 of economy number 1 becomes a more efficient user of all its productive factors. Model 0 and the benchmark were compared in terms of their responses to this stimulus. The benchmark's dynamics were quite nearly parallel to those of Model 0, most notably in that both models operated to the end of efficiently liquidating their trade imbalances. One notable difference between Mod 0 and the benchmark shows that our imposition of international finance causes a delay in Economy 1's realization of its material advantage in terms that benefit its household sector. Here we see that the transient period has Economy 2's household experiencing an interval of superior benefit from the initial stimulus, as Economy 1 gathered the resources it would need to realize its new technical potential. In this interval, Economy 2 did the greater part of the financing for Economy 1's expansion, and it benefited accordingly. Net benefits from this expansion only flipped over to Economy 1's favor as the transients died out, and the economies liquidated their international settlement accounts. Where the benchmark model has an economy making use of international finance only insofar as it has a trade imbalance, the models introduced for this video will use international finance to perpetuate trade imbalances indefinitely, even after the transient patterns of adjustment have subsided, and the initial stimulus has been entirely and forever absorbed by the system. The first of these demonstrations has an economy neutralizing its international financial initiatives when proceeds from its current international financial positions offset its current trade balance. This demonstration shows the mathematical possibility that international financial imbalances can come into an offsetting relation with trade imbalances that will persist indefinitely. We refer to this demonstration as our Colonial Model to suggest the financial arrangements created by Europe's imperialist adventures, in which mother countries were able to impose permanent debt servitude upon their colonies. As shown in the comparison between the colonial and benchmark models' measures of household well-being, these international financial arrangements greatly accentuate the benchmark separation between the living standards of the two economies. While the economic reasoning behind these comparisons permits no limit as to how long debt servitude might prevail, history shows us that colonized populations are entirely capable of realizing their predicament and organizing militarily to effect a cancellation of their debts. Our next experiment recapitulates the colonial model, except that our global financial authority has become even more authoritarian, in the sense that its globally optimal interest rates and investment terms are imposed on both national economies. This globalist model is intended to represent the limiting case of a world governed by international arbitrage initiatives that operate to equalize the financial parameters governing all economies. Upon comparing the globalist model with our benchmark model, we find interesting similarities and contrasts. In the leftmost column, we again see familiar steady-state patterns develop in regard to the supply and demand series for good 2. But the middle column's comparison of living standards presents us with a striking contrast and that the economy with the greater technical potential is now the perpetual debt slave of the economy that had no improved technique. This counterintuitive eventuality is explained through the pattern of household benefits noted earlier in the benchmark model. Recall that we saw Economy 2's households experience a period of superior benefit from the initial stimulus, as Economy 1 gathered the resources it would need to realize its new technical potential. In this transient interval, Economy 2 presumably did the greater part of the financing for Economy 1's expansion. Here we see that the financial advantage established in this transient period becomes permanent under the globalist rules for international settlements. The international financial positions that advantaged Economy 2 during the transient period are perpetuated to the end that Economy 2's passive income from international investments more than offsets its trade deficit, with the excess providing for the superior living standard. The rightmost column shows parallel outcomes in respect to the model economy's currency values, even while the unification of financial parameters has greatly dampened the financial parameters' transience. All these matters are brought together when we compare our three variations on Model 0 in terms of their series for household well-being and for foreign payments. The materially advantaged Economy 1 has its monetary flows presented in green, and the materially neutral Economy 2 has its monetary flows presented in yellow. In the leftmost column at the top, we have our benchmark dynamics of the advantages gained by Economy 1's household sector as the model absorbs the technical stimulus. The time series for trade balances and proceeds from international placements are graphed below. Here we see international settlement accounts being liquidated as trade imbalances are resolved to zero. The middle column presents these same series for our colonial model. Once again, we see the enhanced separation between the living standards in Economies 1 and 2. The financial series below show this distinction being supported by passive income flowing from Economy 2 to Economy 1, owing to international financial placements that have become static. The rightmost column presents these series for a globalist model, which has the globally optimal interest rate and investment term imposed on both national economies. The top graph shows that, under this regime, the technically neutral Economy 2 achieves an advance in its living standards over those of the technically advantaged Economy 1. The lower graph shows this peculiar result being supported by permanent international financial placements that favor the technically weaker of the two economies. Whether or not such a circumstances might be sustained without eventual recourse to the court of war is once again a political rather than an economic question. We hope some instruction has been accomplished by demonstrating that three plausible regimes for international settlements can support essentially the same material outcomes while generating three radically different outcomes in terms of national living standards.